the one unique, like from a clinical perspective, phenomenon of Ibogaine, which is almost when people describe it miraculously, and also from this, like the science seems miraculous, is that it has this effect where it eliminates physical dependence to opioids, which is absolutely remarkable.
Welcome to Almost Got It, as the world is hurtling towards technological singularity and longevity is exploding, and research into consciousness and all of this is taking off. You are joining us as two friends who share passion for engineering and entrepreneurship and personal growth and biohacking as we try to figure out what the hell does it all mean. And today we are really delighted to have our friend Jeeshan Chowdhury with us. He's a physician scientist, an entrepreneur. He's been an advocate for transformative mental health care for a long time. Previously, he was the founder and CEO of Journey Colab, which was a biopharmaceutical company working on synthetic mescaline. And he's an MD from the University of Alberta. He's got a master's and a DPhil from the University of Oxford, also a Rhodes Scholar. And he's now at the beginning of something new that we're about to hear about here. And so, Jeeshan, thank you so much for being with us. It's truly an honor.
Thanks for having me. I had a lot of conversations with Dylan. Nice to meet you, Ben. And excited to jump in.
Absolutely. And our usual disclaimer, you also have Dylan Dane here as a host, who's an engineer and entrepreneur, a graduate from MIT, an ex-Googler with an exit to Google, a YC founder, and a burner and a cat father.
And we have Ben, who is, of course, an engineer and entrepreneur as well, and who also had an exit to Google and used to be the CEO at the Esalen Institute, and have spent decades as a CEO coach and also a father. And before we jump in, please make sure to hit that subscribe button and the like button and support us with this podcast, and let us know what we can do better. Always open to your feedback. Super excited to interview my friend Jeeshan, who is an amazing intellectual who's been working for a long time on the psychedelic space and a number of other things. So let's dive in.
You know, one of the things is that I really, in a sense, grew up with quite a bit of privilege of just being born into the U.S. and born into San Francisco and all the opportunity.
And being white.
And hey, I'm white presenting, okay? I'm Jewish. We've got 4,000 years of discrimination. So, but yes. So all of that privilege, but that wasn't your experience. I would be interested if you could share just a little bit about your journey to getting here and to the US. How did that happen?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. You know, as I hold the question, I'll start off by that. My most recent work has been on getting out of a victim mentality, which I didn't think that I had. And it was an experience with Ibogaine at Beyond, my friends Talia and Tom run, that was really instructive to me. So I say that for myself and also to you, in that, like, you know, we have one of the areas I'm also working on is, like, you know, our past informs us, absolutely. And it's also something that we are not dictated by. And so I want to say that to myself before I say the story to you, just as from my own self. And that's like that I want to acknowledge, like, that's my work right now.
And before you go into it, because what you said there is so poignant, and I'm sure for me it sort of feels like an obvious thing, right? Like, oh, I'm noticing this belief pattern in my mind that I'm a victim, and I did Ibogaine, but I'd like to start to unpack some of those things. So can you just say, in your words, what is a victim mentality? What does that actually mean? Because that can be thrown around a lot.
Yeah, I think it's like the broadest definition is where things are happening to you rather than that you are taking agency of those things. So, and for me in
your
particular,
belief is that that things are being acted out on you and you don't have agency. You're not able to control that.
Yeah, and the reason I went to do the experience was that I had made the decision to shut down my last company, which was a psychedelic company, in the face of we took a bet on a new regulatory regime coming out in 2025. Us and many people, including those at MAPS who had worked on it for decades. I only worked on it for a few years, and so it was like hard for a lot of us, much harder for them than for me, just to put that out there. And so I wanted to ask this question of like, well, why, like, if I want to do things differently, like, what are the things that I need to let go? And like, I noticed that I was not able to let go of my past in ways that I knew that was hindering my decision making, my outlook, and I was frustrated. I was like, why am I still like trapped in this? I had a very common experience of being an immigrant and being bullied, and that motivated me a lot to be ambitious and achieve the things I had, but I still felt like it was holding me back. And in the Ibogaine experience, what came to me, which oddly enough, I do these experiences, I come back and tell my wife about them, and she's like, I was hoping you would figure that out finally. So it's like, it's like, it's this thing where like, you can know things cerebrally, or, like in psychedelics, we say it's like one thing to know things, it's one thing to feel things. It's even one thing to like be conceptually aware of something and then to accept something else. And like what came through me in that experience was that I was holding on, to be totally transparent here, is like I was holding on to that bullied kid because it allowed me then to be not accountable in my actions. It allowed me to I use that victim mentality to do things that I'm not proud of, to do, not to be my best self, and to be blunt, not getting into the details of it, but act in ways that now that I have a son that I am ashamed of, and then that I regret. And so that that was a big insight. It was like, wait, I'm holding on to this for a reason. I'm holding on to it because it's an excuse for me not to be my best, not to be accountable, quite frankly, to be selfish. And it allowed me to do those things. And I did some very selfish things. And it also is the part of me that held me back from like getting up in the morning earlier than I wanted to do the hard things. And it's that duality of it. It's like, yes, I'm using this for, in the short term benefit, but it's also holding me back. And so I think many of us, I know it's not a common story. Like there's so much written about like the victim triangle and like the victim mentality and how to escape it. And like I have a friend of mine, even before going into this experience, I was like, he's a very successful, it's my friend Wojciech from OpenAI. And I asked him, like, you're successful, like what, you know me very well, we live together. What advice do you have for me? And he's just like, the victim mentality is an easy one to hold on to. And at the time, it was like a few months before my experience, I was like, I'm not holding on to one. Like I've done so much work in like therapy and psychedelics and psychedelic assisted therapy. Like I know my past, I've acknowledged it, I've moved on. And it was just like, you have these like peak experience. I wouldn't say peak experiences, but these moments of clarity where you're just like, oh, man, I am holding on to that. And so it's like, I'm grateful for all the people around me who saw that, waited for me to see it in myself. But like, it's, I guess it's not a double-edged sword in that there's the benefit that it gave for me, at least, was very much in the short term, but the cost was like this long term, like holding me back. That was very detrimental. I'm very grateful that it came to me at the time it did. Often with these experiences, I wish they had come earlier, but I trust in that it came at the time that I needed it too. So that's my definition of like of I guess the classic definition is like where things are happening to you rather than you taking agency to it. But I think the flip side is like, what's that victim mentality allowing you to do? Like, what is the selfish? What is the unaccountable? What are the ways that it's allowing you to indulge and get away with the things that you don't want to do? And that was, I think for me, that was the insight. It's like, oh, it's letting me be this like person I don't want to be. And act in ways in relationship to myself, to my company, like all these ways, like it's allowing me to be less than I am, or less than I want to be. And like dealing with that overarching like shadow, as we call, was super important.
Gee, I love it that we're diving straight in. I'm curious. You did Ibogaine, and it's one of the most profound things I personally have done as well. And we've talked about this. I'm curious. You have a unique perspective on this now that you've experienced the journey and the benefits yourself, but you're also a medical doctor and a scientist who's spent years working on psychedelics, and so. I'm curious, as a therapeutic modality, what's your sort of verdict on Ibogaine and how it's unique?
Sure. I mean, Ibogaine is a very unique psychedelic. It's often classed in its, and I don't even know how to pronounce the word. Dylan, do you know how to pronounce it? Like origin? Like, it's a long Latin word. It essentially talks like a waking dream state. It's different in so many different ways. One, it's a huge molecule. It works across a number of receptor pathways. I can't even enumerate all of them. But beyond like the classic psychedelic 5-HT2A serotonin pathway that psilocybin, LSD, mescaline, like the classical psychedelics work across. It's one of the most long. It's the longest acting psychedelic when it's taken in the iboga form. Even ibogaine hydrochloride is as long as longer than LSD or mescaline in the acute phase, and even past that. And the experience itself is very much like the name implies, like a waking dream, where um, most people have this what Nolan Williams calls this like stereotypical experience. By that they mean like it takes different forms, but roughly it's like this life. It's called like this. He calls it this life review, where not everyone receives it. I was very fortunate to have this experience where emotionally salient memories, and in a machine learning way, I would call that like um, uh, highly weighted experiences or highly labeled or tagged data, um, emotionally tagged data comes up, and and I experienced it from not even a third party, but almost like from looking from the fourth wall in, as if you're watching. For me, like my experience mapped onto like a 3D house, and I was moving through different rooms in the house, and I was seeing experiences from as young as like 2 or 3, like a toddler's age, but seeing me interact with my brothers, me interacting with my family, me interacting as a school age experience, and the incredible thing about it is that it's this detached experience where, for me, it was not I was a toddler looking at my brother; it was me looking at the two of us. And while I've had experiences on other psychedelics that are very visual, what really struck out for me was just the auditory recall. So I heard myself as a toddler. I heard this voice, and I'm like, oh, that's my son. I was really hoping my 2-year-old son would show up, and I'm like, that doesn't quite sound like him. I'm like, oh my God, that's my voice. As a 2 or 3-year-old, I can't tell the exact time period. That's my brother's voice as it was when he was a child. And it was like full fidelity, like the recall and like hearing that and like passing through those. So like my experience was like going through this life review, seeing these like emotionally salient moments, seeing them in this detached way. Like I was like kind of like as if I was like um in an audience in an amphitheater looking down on the stage as they were passing through. And then the next stage, again, this is Ibogaine, so not Ibogaine hydrochloride, not Iboga, which the way I like to describe them is like Ibogaine is like wading into a kiddie pool. And what I hear about Iboga, it's like jumping into the ocean. So it's like a very like small taste of a much larger experience. I had been told that you can like query or like ask questions, which I was like, how would this mean that you can do that? But essentially, like, um, if you held on, like, as I held on to it, like, it was well, the first phase I was much receiving these visions or experiences. The second stage was where I could hold on to intention and say, like, what am I really afraid of, or what really matters? And if I held on to that intention really hard, like I gripped it with my mind, like I would see different visions forming that were like symbolic answers. So like, for example, for like, like what's the thing that really matters? Like I have this dream, I have this repeated dream where like I'm at a party or something, and there's like this really fun part of the party, and I've left it to go find my jacket, to find my brother or someone else, and I can't find my way back. And it's so annoying because I don't know if you guys have this experience where you have a dream, you wake up and you're kind of like in between. You're like, I want to go back and finish the dream. And like, I just wake up frustrated because I'm just like, I can never get back to the thing I'm going to. And I'm like, okay, I had this intention that I'm going to, in this waking dream where I have some control over it, I'm going to like force myself to get to it. And it was hard to get to. It took me like several tries because if I heard something in the room, I'd be distracted and it would take me there, or I had to navigate this maze in my mind, which is again, very particular manifestation for myself. But I eventually get to it, and it's a view of my family in there. But like, and which may seem like an obvious answer, but like that's just how navigable of an experience is. And the way I looked at the Ibogaine experience very much was that, you can construct your reality from sensory input and interoception mostly, but like sensory input. Ibogaine allowed me to, instead of having the input be real-time sensory input, I was forming my reality from my stored memories. And that was constructing my reality in real time. And I could explore those, which is just incredible that your mind, one, has these things stored out, at least for me,
it is pretty amazing that it's sort of like kind of gives you access to all these fragments of memory that you thought you lost completely. I'm also curious, as I was listening to you, if my experience was different from yours, because for some little bit more context for the listener here, Ibogaine, it comes from this plant Iboga from the Gabon region of, I think, West Africa, and they've been traditionally used it as a coming of age ceremony. And it's like this, something that people do once in their lifetime as they come of age, and the whole village gets together and dances all night, kind of thing. And lately it's been used by veterans and who have PTSD from certain war events and whatnot, and then also people who are addicted to heroin and things like that, and there's been remarkable results, people recovering very quickly, and very significant clinical effects.
The one unique, like from a clinical perspective, phenomenon of Ibogaine, which is almost, when people describe it miraculously, and also from this, like the science seems miraculous, is that it has this effect where it eliminates physical dependence to opioids, which is absolutely remarkable. Like opioid addiction is such a hard addiction from many angles, but the one is that, like, there's the psychological addiction, but there's this physical addiction where your dopamine receptors become dependent the opioid receptors become dependent on it, and then when you remove it, people go through this terrible physical withdrawal. And one flood dose of Ibogaine or Iboga completely eliminates that. So you'll talk.
Do you have
to
a theory as to the mechanism for this as a clinician?
No, I don't. I don't know. I think people are looking at it, but what's incredible about it is that you get this like physical dependence, and somehow it's reset, and people wake up even after difficult, harrowing Ibogaine experiences, being like, wait a minute, like, it's because it's often people who've tried to quit on their own many times opioids, and they are familiar with it, like the heart racing, the sweating, like just the nausea, like all this, like feeling absolutely terrible. And my friend Juliana, she shared an experience where she had a very challenging Ibogaine experience, was like physically in danger, woke up in the emergency room almost after a near-death thing, and still was saying, but wait a minute, like I'm alive and I'm not physically dependent on opioids. This is incredible. Like it's
by the way, you do need to do it with a doctor present, because there's some risk of cardiac arrest and stuff like that.
There's a couple of things just to add there. One is just for anyone who's listening, that it seemed what I've understood is that it turns off that desire, the addiction desire, for a window of time. Right. And so there is a certain percentage of people that regress. And what they find is that you have that window, but then it depends what you do. Right. If you then, add in, like Narcanon, or you start doing more constructive things with your life that build community and connection, so that you don't need to revert back to that. It sort of gives you that window, but it's not hit the button once and then you're never addicted again. I had a close friend of mine do it for really intense alcoholism, And and initially he stopped drinking, and then he was even able to drink again, but in a moderate way. And then I've seen some regression, not to the level of extreme that he was
Mhm.
before, but definitely still what I would consider an alcoholic relative to most of my friends.
And this is, I think, generally with psychedelics, I really wish we could tell people that it's a magic bullet, that all you have to do is have a high dose of psychedelics and you will be permanently changed. But empirically, we don't know that, right? Like we could, and I'll say empirically in two ways. Like one, we know that there's a natural experiment happening every season where people go to a festival, they take large amounts of psychedelics. Most people have a safe. Some people have a broad chip, but like generally, there's like safety in like large dose psychedelics just from the festival experience. Even though we know there are some risks there, and in the sort of natural studies of it, like, and people like seem to have this like peak experience. There's a bit of an afterglow, but then they largely revert back to what their experiences from before, the patterns of behavior before, and this is also true with psychedelic assisted, like psychedelics in the therapeutic context, where the I would say the OGs in the psychedelic world have like, whether it's from a traditional concept or from the scientific concept, have said, or angle have said, like, yes, like this creates this window of change, but if we don't have the integration afterwards, and I was at Psychedelic Science 25 just last week, like the theme and the password of the Wi-Fi was integration. Like it's all about integration. It's like, why do we need this? And like, I think the science is finally catching up on that. And Gould Dolan's work at Hopkins, now at Berkeley, she talks about this in mouse models where we see that like psychedelics open what she calls like this like critical period. And the critical periods are these moments in our lives that we are more receptive to our environment, more receptive to learning. Again, if you think about it from a machine learning model, it's where you have access to the training data, or you've increased the learning rate for this period of time. We're all familiar with that in terms of language, in that like when I have a toddler who just learned to say sentences in a week because he's in this critical period of language development where he's more sensitive around that. And then that language development critical period closes. This is why when you learn a language as an adult, it's much harder than when you're a child. And her viewpoint on like plasticity and why psychedelics work is that they are temporarily opening this critical period, and things like MDMA open it around social learning. Different psychedelics may open it may predominantly open different periods of learning, but for example, for MDMA, it's social, and that window is open for a period of time. And the length of that critical period being opened is directly proportional to the length of the acute psychedelic experience. So something like ketamine is a very short opening. It's like that critical period is maybe 48 hours. MDMA is measured in a few weeks. Something like Ibogaine, that critical period is open for months. And she's shown this in
by
mouse
that
models.
definition, would you say like 5-MeO is open only for minutes?
In this model, yes, yeah, it's only open
model,
for
right?
it's only,
it's probably
only,
like not a strictly accurate model,
yeah,
but it's like
yeah,
good
yeah.
heuristic to think about.
Yeah, it's a good heuristic. And so like I actually don't know if she studied 5-MeO DMT because it's a very short experience. But to what you were saying, Ben, about it, why integration matters, like to me, when I tell people like you've done a psychedelic, I say like, in the more woo world, you say like you're in a very sacred time. Like there's an opening, like you're sensitive to what's around you. From like a more mechanistic point of view, it's like your rate of learning is increased. You have like you open the access to your training data. So now what you put in this period really matters. And so if you start to do behaviors, if you have role models, if you do therapy or coaching, whatever, like you're just much more sensitive for it to stay and be durable after the window closes versus than when you're in room temperature consciousness.
Have you like
hold on? Let me ask a couple of questions. I think it's important. One is, what is the metaphor that you use for psychedelics? Because I think that's one of the hard things, right? It's not a Vicodin, right?
Yeah.
You don't have pain, you take the Vicodin, it goes away. So how did you think about it?
Yeah, I and this might be a theme in what I talk about. Like I love thinking about thinking of our brains as a computer. Like we're in this age where machine learning and AI is like the technology of our time. And there's I forget the concept, like basically like humans or like a culture will explain concepts in terms of the most advanced technology of the time. A good example of this is when the internet came out, we called it the information superhighway, because people understood that there are roads, there are much bigger roads, there are bigger roads that get you faster into more places. And so we called it the superhighway. And it's not bad. It's not a bad analogy. There's better ones now, but like it fit. And so like in this age, like talking about our brains like machines, I think is useful, because that's what people are thinking about as the most advanced way to think about complex things. And it's also true. It's interesting. Like I think that many people, and I know Dario from OpenAI, formerly Anthropic, formerly at OpenAI, now at Anthropic, said this famously, that like we thought that by understanding the human brain, it would help us understand how we build machines. And in fact, the quite opposite has happened, where by learning about how we train these machine learning models, it's helped us understand how the brain works. And so it's going in the opposite direction, which is very unanticipated. And I think we'll get some bi-directional one, but it's far, like much more from like, oh, this is how like pre-training works. And you can almost think about like your toddler and young age is like, you have this like infrastructure of the model and encoded in the human brain, both in terms of like the I guess the hardware, and to some degree the connectivity is there. And then and this is very, very relevant for me because I have a toddler. You can see like he's just very efficiently absorbing data and like filling in he's in the pre-training mode. And then he starts to like, well, then like get feedback and then prune those things. And that's, essentially what we do with machine learning models. And so back to your question, I think thinking about it in terms of machine learning is very helpful. And so I think of psychedelics, going back to this concept of opening critical periods, is that it is allowing you to be able to access your training data for a period of time, and that you can then either rewrite training data. And so if you have like trauma, for example, the way I like to explain trauma is that it's a model that's overfit to an experience. And like overfitting to people listening is like when like you your training data isn't diverse enough to be able to generalize to a wider environment. So you guys can help me with like what would be an example of that in like, if you're training like cats and dogs, for example, let's think this true. If there's not enough images of a cat there for it, then it will falsely think that, like, if you don't give it enough examples of things that aren't a cat, it will think like everything is a cat, because that's all you've given it, right? And so like in trauma, because emotions are high, like emotions are how I think the brain like understands how much weighting to give to different experiences. And so like high emotion means that you really weight this. So trauma is a very emotional experience. You weight this data very strongly, and now you've overfit this. And you can see this in PTSD, where people have gone through, let's say, let's look at simple PTSD, not complex PTSD. You have a traumatic experience, and now you're hypervigilant around everybody. You hear a noise and you startle. That's basically the concept of overfitting. And what psychedelics allow you to do is there's a couple ways you could think about it, but for the most part, I think what's doing is letting you retrain that overfit data. And so you're either writing over it and saying, okay, I'm experiencing this trauma, and this is literally what they're trying to do in some parts of psychedelic assisted therapy, is like look at that experience, but from this third party or detached perspective, and rewrite the experience, or like add more training data to say maybe dilute it out. Like I think both are happening. And then after the experience goes through and you have this like period of like being able to integrate, why do people have like these durable experiences or changes? I think that's what's happening. It's like we're rewriting or overwriting training data,
Yeah.
and that's why it extends beyond the period of the experience.
Right. So just to be concrete, let me play it back through an example, and then you can sort of correct anything that I'm not getting right. So just an example of trauma would be where you have a very large reaction that is sort of inappropriate to the situation. That's how you can sort of know that.
I would actually say it's appropriate to the experience, right? Like I think the fear,
at the time.
Like
to use a concrete example, let's say you had an abusive parent that when they had an angry look on their face, they would start to hit you as a small child, right? And so now you're older, and anytime someone has an angry look in your face, you sort of shut down, maybe go into a freeze response or a flight response, or even you lash out, right? Because then your expectation is, right, and this is the overfitting of the model, your expectation is that you're going to be hit, but you're not, right? Because now you're in a totally different situation. Maybe you're with your loving partner who's angry about something, which is valid, but they're not going to hit you. But you're not having that physiological or psychological reaction that is appropriate to what's actually happening in the situation. And so what you're talking about is that you're able to go back to that training data and recontextualize it, go, oh yeah, that was specific to that individual or specific to mom or dad. And that's not always the case, right? And I think what we're going for when we're doing therapy is accurate discernment. Hey, sometimes you might be on the street and someone's angry and they might actually be threatening, in which case you could have that trauma level response, but it would be appropriate in that situation where you were actually, in threat. But it's not necessary when your loving partner is angry at you because you forgot to bring home dinner or whatever the thing is, and then start to reshape that into an appropriate response of, oh yeah, I could feel a little fear because someone's angry, but I don't need to run out of the room, or I don't need to attack them.
Yeah, and like in this case, like you can successfully, through therapy, CBT, like other models, try and change this response in room temperature consciousness. Like I talk about like different levels of consciousness, like temperature, and like, so in room temperature consciousness, you can do it. It takes a very long time because if we go back to the machine learning analogy, you're kind of like feature engineering at the top. You're trying to build these rules to say, okay, well, this wasn't the case. And it's like this complex thing that eventually can get you to be like, okay, it's my partner being angry at me. This is not my partner. That's not my parent or my caregiver being angry at me. My life's not in danger. You can get there. It takes like a long time to do it. It's very arduous. It seems that with psychedelics, because we're not doing this like surface level feature engineering, we're actually getting into the core training data. It's much more efficient to be able to do it in the right context because you're working at the deeper layers of the model, not the superficial layers of the model. The other thing that I like about this like thing around overfitting that is, I think, might be helpful for people in their own psychology. It's like, why do we see that like people go to relationships that repeat childhood traumas? It's because overfitting also feels confident to the model. So if you pick a partner that is abusive to you the way that caregiver was, it's terrible for you, but at this very deep level, it feels familiar because your model is satisfied that like, wait, I have a model of the world where people are going to hit me. People are going to get angry and they're going to be abusive to me. And somehow it's all those questions you probably have like in yourself, or someone who's like, why do they always end up with these people? Why are they ending up with people? Because in a deeper, like not even subconscious level, the model is like, yes, I'm overfit to that. And when I experience that, not that I feel good or I'm being rewarded, but the delta between my prediction and my expectation has come down, and that feels computationally efficient, and therefore I seek out these type of relationships.
Yeah, that's an incredibly good way to put it. So I think people don't something that with machine learning, when you're training a model, like you're saying, what you're trying to do is reduce that delta between the prediction and the expectation, right? And the human brain is a predicting machine, much like an LLM. And what you're saying is exactly right. You would feel more comfortable with a similarly damaged person because like they behave the way that you predict, and your brain would predict.
One of the models that I've used, I was taught to me by what was his name? I'm forgetting his name right now, but he's a doctor that like what he had was a consortium of other doctors, 400 or 500 different doctors from around the world that were looking at different parts of the brain, and then trying to synthesize all of the neuroscience research, all the psychological research into an overarching model. And what he found in practice that they pointed to was essentially the brain has two modes: ensure safety and then maximize thriving, right? And that safety at the creature level wiring is simply defined as like, don't die. And so even if you've been through that incredibly abusive experience growing up, the fact that you're here means you didn't die. And therefore that experience, if you recreate it, you won't die. And so anything else, even though logically with your human brain, you can go, oh, a partner who's totally safe and won't assault me is better. At the creature level, you're like, that's different, right? And that's what you're pointing out, is that there's a larger delta between prediction and reality with a safe partner, a nonviolent partner than a violent partner, for example. And therefore you go to that. But I really like this the model you're using of prediction versus reality. And so there's one other thing that I would say that I think is valuable, and maybe you're noticing this with your toddler, is we as humans often employ at the early stage single test learning, right? You probably see, like, I would watch my son, like, he would hear a word for the first time and then he would immediately apply it. And what he's doing, my interpretation, and please debate this with me, is that there's a dependency on the context, on the universe in which he lives in, to give feedback that invalidates and corrects any mistakes in that single test learning, right? Like, he takes a word and he'll apply it and he gets it right 3 times, and then the 4th time he applies it in a context that doesn't make sense, and then I go, oh no, use this word instead, and he goes, okay, and he rolls on. But if you have a narrow context, right? Like, if you have a small world and you've only got a few figures around and one often beats you, then you're locked into that context, and you have this belief that anger on someone's face means violence, right?
Yeah. I mean, a couple of reactions. So, like, what you were talking about, like be like, don't die or thrive, maps very well into like explore and exploit mode in models, right? So, like, this idea that with the model, it can be like exploits, where it finds a strategy, it's getting rewarded for it, and it's like, okay, I'm going to do that, and like that can, you don't know whether that, if we like extract this into like a 3D space, like, is that place of that reward, is that a local minima or a global minima? And you just don't know. It's like, let's say you get to a place where you're getting like 40% of reward, and you're like, okay, there's 40%, and you don't even know that. You just know what you've sampled. It may be 20%, it may be 80%. You don't know, because you don't know the full universe or plane that you're in. And right
I think
next
we,
to
we
you,
might be jumping over some stuff, G.
okay.
Maybe it's worth explaining that. Like, I think the weights in a model can be described topologically.
Well, I mean,
as like a 3D space.
please do. You know better than I do.
Yeah. So what G's basically talking about is the weights in a model can be described topologically as like a 3D space, and they're like these peaks and valleys, and you want to you kind of like want to guide the training essentially guides you towards a valley essentially, and where it's the lowest point, and essentially like what you were telling earlier, the difference between the prediction and the expectation is the reality is minimum, and the exploit or explore paradigm is that do you kind of like kind of stay in that valley, or like kind of do you explore towards the new kind of valley kind of thing, and yeah, so it's just like a whole bunch of machine learning lingo that you're using that's super relevant to describing the brain.
Yeah, no, that's a really good way to put it. That you can think about it as like this complex like topology or geography, and you don't know the entire map. Just like in a video game, like, the places that you've been in the video game, but there's places that you haven't been to, and so you're always running this like equation, or like a decision is like, do I stay where I'm at? Is that the lowest point, or is there another lowest point? How far is away? And leaving the lowest point you're in might get you into a higher point where you don't want to be. And so you're making this constant trade-off of like, do I explore more to see if there's somewhere better to be, or do I stay where I know that there's certainty of getting some of this certain low point? And it's interesting, we don't talk about it in terms of peaks, we talk about it in terms of valleys, because that's a lower energy state that we're trying to get to. And so machines are doing this, and to what you were saying, Ben, like, we're doing this too, and it's fascinating to see, like, in the synthesis of psychology, they're saying the same thing. It's like, am I trying to stay alive, or trying to explore?
So let me see if I can apply the example that we're using. I wish I could get us off onto a different example, not about physical violence, but it's essentially what you're saying is, let's say I've had this model overfit, right? I was a parent.
A really easy one is you being bit by a dog when you were a child.
Great. Okay, great. So So I was bit by a dog as a kid. And so when I'm confronted with a dog, if you look at the topology, there's a low point, a valley that is, and that low point is this dog is going to bite me, right? And then the high point is this dog will be friendly, right? And so that's what I think is going on, even though that's not actually accurately mapped to reality. Most dogs are friendly, and every once in a while there's one that might.
It's actually like, so if you it's slightly different in that given the experience space you have had, the training data set, you have a local minima where it seemed like the lowest point where the dog's going to bite you. But if you had more data, the true lower point that's going to be lower than the point that you're at is that you're going to find out is that most dogs are friendly.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, but the in this case, the friendly dog thing would be a higher.
It's actually
it'd actually be lower.
It would actually
You're right,
be lower,
Dylan.
but
It'd actually be lower. So like,
no, I'm saying if I have trauma, it's high. If I don't have trauma, it would be dogs friendly would be lower than dogs bite.
So though, if I could step in, like I think like you're in this point where like dogs are gonna bite you, and so you're safe staying away from dogs, and that's your local minimum. It's like all dogs are scary. I'm gonna stay away from them, and like that's safe. So you don't like you're just like I'm gonna stay away from all dogs. There's actually another point in this topology where dogs are friendly and you get a lot of positive things by being close to dogs. But because you think dogs are scared, there's this huge rift. Actually, there's a huge mountain between I'm going to stay away from dogs because they're scary to actually they're golden retrievers and amazing dogs that would give me so much like positive reward in my life. But your fear is like this huge mountain to overcome. And that maps to other experiences too. And you could almost think about, and like, Robin Card Harris talks about this in his like entropic brain theory, which now we're adding a lot of things in, but essentially like what psychedelics and other meditation and other experiences do is they reduce the peaks and valleys so that you can move between these states easier. And so
you're saying that in my mind would be a lower minima around a dog being safe, but there's a peak in between that. I'm not able to
reverse
it. Versus a misprediction where dogs being safe is actually a peak is incorrect. Like the prediction is wrong. It would still be a minima, but I just can't access it.
Yeah, I guess I'm saying that like when we talk about this in topology, Dylan, like come in there, like you're going towards these valleys where like it's like the prediction and the expectation, it's a low energy state. We're also adding another dimension in terms of like a reward function that we're experiencing here too, and that it creates the depth of the valley too.
Maybe the slight confusion is that maybe it is kind of the way Ben's describing it. Maybe it's just that the lower valley doesn't even exist in this person's topology because they just like haven't had that data at all. Yeah, that's possible. Yeah,
that's possible.
Yeah. I should have kind of like another helpful analogy here. I think I'm curious, G, your reaction to how therapy works. One of my, at least how I think about it sometimes is like, but like if you're trying to build muscle, you go to the gym, say you want to try to build your biceps or whatever. There are two ways to do that, right? Like one way to do that is to take a light weight, like say 10 pounds, and you do like lots of reps, right? You do like hundreds of reps and you get a bigger bicep. Or you can grab like, 35, 50 pound weight and like kind of try to do like one max rep, right? Like super hard. And then so also kind of gets to the same place. So my analogy there on how therapy works is that in the human brain, the way our neural net trains, the emotional reaction, as you were saying earlier, is essentially kind of correlated with the final weight that is set around that experience. And so dog bites you and you have this massive emotional reaction, and then you set a high weight to this one event, and then like kind of the model is sort of like tilted, right? And so how do you correct this? My mental analogy is that, well, you can fix that in two ways. You can do things like CBT or neuro-linguistic programming, journaling, meditation, some of the things that Tony Robbins talks about. These are all like lifting that 10-pound weight, but you do it like 1,000,000 times, right? Like you write to yourself, like, oh, the dogs are not scary or whatever, right? So it's like do it 1,000,000 times and it kind of eventually correct that thing. Whereas sometimes I think what happens with psychedelics is that it's once you take a psychedelic, it's such a heightened experience, right? And everything's like, you take ayahuasca and you talk to God, right? And it's like, that's just like earth shattering. And then now you think about the dog experience in that state. It's like doing that 1 rep max with the 50-pound dumbbell, right? And just like one shot, you have a chance of like rewriting the wrongly set weight. So that's like kind of my mental model for this. I'm curious if that maps to how you would react to that.
Yeah, I think it's very similar in that like that one, like the reason that it's 10 pounds is that it in what I was saying previously, like that 10 pound, like they'll say that 50-pound or 100-pound weight, it feels that way because it's in the training data, and it's the acute experience of Gould Dolan talks about this. Like the experience of being high is the subjective experience of having access to your training data. That's what it feels like to be working in that space. And so like the high emotionality, the mystical experience that's like ineffable in so many ways. That's what it's like to be playing around with this training data. So you're saying in a way it's like it's high emotionality, that's why it's higher weight. I would say like that, like valiance or like level of experience is what's related to accessing lower, like deeper layers of the model. So very, very similar.
Yeah. Gee, I was just like, I feel like we just jumped right in. I'd love to actually talk about, kind of take a step back and talk about how did you end up with, I mean, I was doing research to kind of ask you good questions, and I realized that there's like a lot more that I didn't even know about your past and all the cool things that you've done. I'm just curious, like, where did little G begin, and when did little G decide that, hey, I'm gonna dedicate my life to finding better tools to help people make themselves better? Like, what was that impetus? What was the motivation? Was that an event?
Yeah. I remember it pretty clearly. I grew up as an immigrant in Canada, like a very like loving and supporting family, but like it was a very conservative time and place, many immigrants end up in. And I always kind of like felt like I didn't belong. I was like very bullied at school, like again, like many people. But like the one thing out for me was just like being really good in school. Like I was always the last kid picked at recess, like always in gym class. I've never been, but like I was the first one done with tests because I just like flew through them. And I remember like this one like kid was just like, I hate being behind you in tests because like you're done, and I'm just like barely through the test, and I'm like, yeah, this stuff is mostly easy for me. It's the only time I felt like I was like at the head of the class, was in the academic track, and then so like I also have like parents from like Bangladesh and the Indian diaspora, so like really pushed for academics. Very grateful for that. But like I chased achievement, like to feel like many people do, like this hole that they have. And I didn't realize that until I sold my first company, like sort of the first success I had, where I thought like, I did this, like now I'm in a secure place that I've been chasing my whole life. But like things actually got worse. And for me, like that manifested in what I thought was procrastination at the time. I was just like, oh, I just like can't get things done. Like I'm like wasting away time. I didn't realize that was a manifestation of anxiety. Like I thought anxiety was what I saw in my mom. Which was like a very feminine form of anxiety, or a lot around social anxiety. But for me, it was just like every time work came up, it got worse and worse. Where like I would start something on Monday, and it wouldn't be till like Thursday night, like 4 a.m. in the morning, that the pressure of it would get it done. And like I still would do well, but it wasn't my best work. And as you get more advanced in your career, those cracks started to show.
I mean, you did some hard
yeah. It was like this paralysis. It was this paralysis where like I just couldn't be like, I knew I needed to do something, and like I just couldn't, like I can't describe it other than like it probably, I was experiencing panic attacks that I couldn't, like, that didn't look like the panic attacks that I saw in my clinical practice. It didn't look like the panics I saw in people in my life who had anxiety, where they were like having this like very like visceral, like they felt like they were having a heart attack. Like to me, panic was never like that. It was just like this freeze. I suppose like we have these different responses. Like there's flight, there's fight or flight, like the fight or like leave, but there's also freeze and fawn that I think we forget. And I think that like was not as talked about. And I will get into this freeze state where I was just paralyzed with this deadline coming up. It was more intellectual where like I couldn't actually get the words out. I couldn't like type the first sentence. I couldn't start putting things out, like putting them out of my head into a concrete way, which is very uh uh it's what's the word? I suffered a lot. There's so much suffering, to be totally honest. Like I talk about like the output, but like it was just like this a lot of anguish, a lot of suffering, and then I got to this point where the cracks were showing in my life professionally, and like I remember being up in the middle of the night trying to get like some like basic presentation done or something, and I'm like, okay, like I basically have tried everything, and this might be like very cliche, but like I had gone to Burning Man with a friend. They left early, so I had this like space in my car, and like these like pilgrimage type experiences just like have this high density of connection. And so I was telling a friend, hey, I'm leaving, I'm going by myself, I'm not looking forward to drive by myself. And he's like, oh, actually, like this is amazing, like my friend needs a ride home, do you mind giving them a ride? And I was like, yeah, sure. And so like we're driving back. They end up being a therapist who's studying psychedelics, and I was talking about like I was in this open state after being in Burning Man, talking about like, oh yeah, like I sold my company, but I'm like really stuck. And they're like, have you like heard of like psychedelic therapy? I'm like, I like heard about the trials and whatnot, but like, and they're like, well, there's ways to access it, like through people who are trained. You do have to go abroad and whatnot. And I was like, well, I'll try anything at this point. And that's how I got connected to psychedelic assisted therapy. And like the way I like to describe it, so basically, to answer your question, it was out of desperation. I tried everything else. The cracks were showing in my life professionally and personally. I was very fortunate to be connected to a psychedelic therapist, someone who had done training in the work. I'm always grateful for that, because there's so many people who just like say there are people jumping into this that don't have the training for it. And so I was very fortunate in this case, went somewhere where I could access it legally. And the way I like to describe it is like my whole life, I felt like I was drowning in my mental health, and things like therapy, SSRIs, it was like someone threw me a life preserver and I could hold on to that. But that constant weight of pulling me down was always there. And psychedelics.
How did you achieve so much though then? Like I'd imagine like a regular, like anyone who looks at your resume, I mean, you were a Rhodes Scholar, you're an MD PhD, which is one of the hardest academic achievements, by the way. And then you sold your company. Like I feel like you should talk about your kind of like all the accomplishment for a little bit, and like
but that was all brute forcing. It was brute forcing. And maybe in my 20s and 30s I had more energy maybe to deal with it, but it was like all just like brute forcing through it. And like I don't talk about it's because it's hard to think about those times, but there was just a lot of anguish in those times.
So
like they
you
weren't
were using it sounds like you would, the procrastination was maybe there, the anxiety, the freeze, but then there was so much pressure, and then you would essentially like overcome the internal resistance. But that means you're just generating a ton of internal friction. Because and it sounds like maybe fear of shaming or something like that was sort of driving it, of like, oh well, I signed up to be this PhD, I better get this shit done. Or how was that coming out?
Well, like, I mean, like and I think a lot of people talk, a lot of founders, and I think a lot of people I've seen who are high achievers talk about this, right? Where it's like their fear of failure drives them to do this thing, and it pushes them to these limits, and they achieve these great things. But when you talk about, like, when I at least talk to people who are like outwardly much more successful, they have that, but they've also been able to shift from a mode of like scarcity to a mode of abundance, where like they're able to do so much more. And like in the, like, I mean, talk about all this anguish, but like in the background too, I would like had all these creative thoughts and this drive and energy to like create new things and like do new things, but it was always balanced by this burden or this rock that I was carrying, which was the fear, the anxiety. And in that first like psychedelic state of consciousness, in this like therapeutic setting, it was like the muddy waters I had been drowning in my whole life. They cleared
Yeah.
up for a moment, and I could look down under the water and see, oh, like it was like my family going through a civil war in Bangladesh, coming to a new country. Like that's a weight that I'm holding in my own ways. It's like
Huh.
being bullied as a kid, what was holding me down. Growing up in like in a very like homophobic time and place, and how I've internalized internalized homophobia, internalized racism, internalized this need for achievement. These are the things. And to go back to what we talked about with integration, like I wish I could say like these psychedelics were these magical scissors that I then came and just snipped off these these weights and I was
Yeah.
free. It was not like that. It was like this moment of awareness where it's like, okay, like these are the things, and I need to slowly either untie these ropes, and actually I don't even use that term anymore. It's more like now I need to learn how to like carry these in my own way. They're always going to be a
Gee,
part of me, but I need these tools to be able to carry them.
I want to for a moment kind of drop into that the diagnosis part because I think I really relate to your experience, this high achieving yet broken kind of thing, and because I think we've had parallels in kind of background and kind of mental state, the rock that you carry around kind of thing. I often think back to a few years ago. I was talking to a really good friend of mine, and just kind of getting I prompted him to give me feedback on like just whatever, give me the most useful feedback that you can. And what he said was, is not specific feedback, but I've always thought that you're one of the smartest people I've ever met, and yet you're not as successful as you should be. And that really hit me. I was like, oh wow, like that is actually true. And been mulling over this, and something that, and we've talked about this, that what came to me, obviously there's no one single reason. There's like a very complicated thing, I think, to answer, but one thing that comes up is that this feeling of having a rock that you carry around, and doing whatever you're doing, you just like got this weight that's just like dragging you, and this is tied to some overfitting in my mental model that needs to be overcome. And I think I know you relate to this, and this is probably at the root of your quest to just collect as many tools as possible and invent new tools to help yourself and others to overcome this type of state.
And I just want to say one thing, like I've had people in my life do that for me as well. And that is like the single greatest thing that you can do. Be ready to receive. I was going to originally say like ask that from your friends, but it's more about being open to receive that,
Right.
and to have and
Right.
cultivate relationships and the spaces to receive that feedback from people. It's such a gift. Like I'm so grateful that you had a friend do that for you. I had a friend after like a series of failed serial monogamous relationships. I was in tears, and he's like, I know you're hurting, and you're the common denominator, buddy. Like, what's happening here? And if it felt like shit, I remember his girlfriend at the time was like, he's like, Rahul, don't say this to him now. He's hurting. And he's like, I've seen this like now 3 times, and I love and I know he's hurting, and he needs to hear this. And thank God he said that to me, I'm grateful that I was open to it. I was a bit defensive, but like. I mean, if anyone listening takes away anything from this conversation, it's like those are such like pivotal moments in our lives, and do whatever you can to like cultivate those relationships, create the space for that. And mostly I think people don't share that with us because they feel like we're not ready for that. And so it's whatever you need to do to be ready to receive that.
Yeah. Or
Yeah.
they're scared, right? I mean, I know I often want to give feedback to friends.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, but you really think about it. It's like, what is the impact? Are they ready to receive it? Right. And there's been so many times in my life, I look back on some of my hardest times, because I had the similar realization to you of like, who's the common denominator in all of these difficult relationships. And it's like, oh shit. And I wish I'd gotten that feedback. Right. I think it takes a lot of courage for, and I really applaud your friend for giving you that feedback, because it takes a lot of courage to do that, because so many times we're we're defensive, or we could be reactive.
And you don't want to lose the friendship. Like if it's that important, like it's the kind of thing where you're like, if you take this wrong, it's like very easy to project that on the person, the friend giving that, and like put it outward to them. And so perhaps like the takeaway here is not like, is just to, for all of us to like do what we need to do to be ready to receive that in our lives.
Yeah. There's a difference between I'm curious what you think about this. The sort of different types of dysfunctional behavior patterns, right? There's like sort of like specific behavior patterns, like you always do this thing when you're presented with this kind of input kind of thing. There's that type of thing. But then there's also kind of like this more textural stuff. It's like this texture of depression and anxiety. And it's something that's really hard to describe. And it's just like, it's almost like, it's not a, and this is a bucket that I'm personally deeply interested in, because it's not so much a, it's not so much a thing you do. It's not so much like you read a book and you get over it. It's like this sort of, the machine is broken. It's like you're an LLM that exists in this pile of meat, and some of your meat is rotten, and it's like this, it's like this, other things other people find not that hard, or like, they're excited about something, they wanna learn about it, they're excited about it, they're like let's go, right? But when you're depressed, the activation energy to do that same action is significantly higher, right? And so this is something that I think, unless you have been depressed, people don't quite appreciate, one. And two, G, you have been obsessed about finding tools to fix that machinery, right? And fundamentally fix your pile of meat and bring it to good state. And I know you with Journey, you explored that with psychedelics, with your new startup. You're exploring a completely new modality. I'm curious what your take on that is. And also, if you want, we could do like a live, check-in on your patient number one.
Yeah, that'd be great. That would be great. So I actually worry about this a lot. I worry about how, like we as humans are like so adaptable. Look at how many different climates that where you can live in, how many different types of food sources, like all these sorts of things. And like I worry on an individual state, the longer that you're in any particular state, you adapt to it and become familiar to it. And we were talking about earlier, like, why do people go for a relationship that's abusive? Because it feels familiar. And after a while, in the depressive state or environment or whatever it may be, combination, it is more computationally efficient to stay in that depressive state. And that if your prediction is that you're going to be sad, you're not going to do something, then like doing the opposite, that delta now is huge. And it just gets bigger and bigger the more you're in it. And so one of the reasons I've been obsessed about these rapid acting tools, knowing that like meditation can work over time, knowing that like psychotherapy, exercise, good diet can work over time, is that we need tools that will like lift us out of these states rapidly, even if they're just for a temporary period. So we know like we can adapt to knowing like, okay, this is what it feels like to be out of the state. I might not be able to hold on to it, but I know I can get out of it. And training your system to be able to be like, there are like knowing that there's these states that you can get out of it rapidly and like longer, spending more and more periods out of it. And psychedelics are one of those states that can do it. And we're seeing with neuromodulation, like we're looking at like TMS. I'm looking at TMS now. Like, I guess as a founder, like you get hit in certain ways, and I got hit by like trying to do something to the FDA, like with a a highly regulated space. My like pendulum swinging in the opposite direction is like, well, what's available now that's off the shelf, that's FDA approved, that we can use now? Like in that bucket of things, like TMS is one that we've had for a very long time, and like, it's safe. We know how it works, and like what Nolan and others have done to show that we can deliver more energy in a shorter period of time. Like TMS typically, and then just for people who don't know, like TMS is transcranial magnetic stimulation. It's where we use very powerful magnets, the same strength of magnet as you would get in an MRI, but like in kind of like a pickleball paddle type of device that's on the surface of your skull. This is completely non-invasive, nothing, it's just placed on your skull. but it generates a magnetic field in like a golf ball like size region of your brain that we can choose by where we put it on the surface of the scalp. And that magnetic field induces an electric current in those neurons, and neurons that wire together fire together, so we can selectively, based on anatomy, strengthen different parts of the brain. And by doing that, we've known since 2008 that's very effective for depression. And what we're trying to do in my new startup, Faria, is can we do what this is incredible like shift that's happened, where can we use the things that we use to help sick people be healthy or well, can we use for well people to be even better? Because if you understand the bell curve, most people of us are in the middle. We've worked with our tools on people who are 2 standard deviations to the left, but statistically exceptional is available. And the wild thing is that, and this makes maybe looks obvious when we look back at it, but the same tools that move someone from 2 to 3 standard deviations on the left of the curve to the middle of the curve can continue to push people, or not push, but help people go from the middle of the curve to the right of the curve. And this it seems obvious, you just use the same thing, but let's just look at GLP-1s, for example. Like GLP-1s came out, they do really well for moving people from diabetes or like extreme BMIs to healthy BMI. But the moment people have talked about, well, let's use someone in a healthy, or like maybe a 25, 26 BMI, 23, they're like, oh, well then you're going to lose muscle mass. Well, what about these concerns about suicidality? Like everybody threw up all these things. And I think like Naval talks about this in a really good way. It's like, most of those concerns are driven by status. Like people achieve this like healthy state the old fashioned way. And now people are getting this accelerant, and people had something to lose by having this faster way, brought up all these concerns. And like the millions of people are now on GLP-1s. They're not innocuous, but they're relatively safe. And we're following that with TMS and saying like, well, we've done it millions of times, millions of treatments now. We know it's safe. So now let's take someone who in the middle of the curve and see if we can help them to be in the exceptional state, very in a similar way as GLP.
I love this, Jay. I personally think the greatest fucking tragedy in the world is that finally, right, like humans who are kind of enslaved to their ground conditions for so long, right? 100 years ago, 50% of your kids would die. Like it's just like tragic situation, not enough food, not enough anything. But today we live in a society, we're at the point that there's no problem that you can't solve. Like, I mean, of course there are certain conditions that are pretty out there, but like, it's so tragic that that people are not just aiming to get better, but also should be aiming to become super normal, right? It's like this almost like semi-god-like state today is possible, like where you should be waking up every day and like, be fucking grateful and feeling incredible about living. And there are enough tools out there today to get us all there. And TMS has been around for a long time, but then people like you are thinking of new approaches to new protocols to use that same old technology to help people like feel even better than normal, which is incredible.
Yeah. And, I had this experience at the Psychedelic conference last week, Psychedelic Science 25, where someone was just like, well, like, what about access and like making things accessible and ethics? Like if this stuff is only available for like the top, like, quintile or top decile of the economy, what about the others? And like, honestly, I said, I don't have a problem with that. I was just like Sam Altman, who was like the chair of of Journey, like gave me this example from Elon and Tesla, where it's like, when they were originally raising money, it was the Tesla Roadster. It was not mass produced. It was actually mostly a Lotus frame with the Tesla inside. But people being able to get in and drive and experience it made it so they could raise the capital. And now you have the Model 3, which is much more accessible. And so to me, it's not a question of like starting at the top. It's a question of that slope on how do we like accelerate the diffusion to more people. And I think like just like the Roadster enabled the Model 3 that many more of us can afford, and there's countless examples of this, by diffusing things from the top down and focusing on that rate, will actually help accessibility for people outside of where we start. And that we should just be obsessed about like, now that we've shown that it works, how do we make it more accessible, just and be obsessed about that. But I got that mistake wrong in Journey, where we actually focused a lot on accessibility, access, inclusivity, reciprocity, which is something we should do, but we, to be honest, this is hard to admit, should have spent a lot more effort on like making sure the company and the product worked, so we had something that could then diffuse. And like I think there's a lot of people in this space around like trying to be your best who have very good intentions, that they want what they're doing not to be a luxury product. I totally understand that. But if you don't obsess about getting the product right first, you don't earn the right to then make it more accessible.
Because anything that works, you can scale.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think this is the classic trap of, idealism over pragmatism. Right. And then, I've dealt with a lot of that, right? Like my experience running Esalen is everyone wants everyone to be able to go to Esalen where you can experience, sort of the latest in human potential. And yet only has 150 beds. And, there are a fixed number of people that can be there a year. It's like 10,000 and you're sort of done. Right. But then other people could take it on and they have, right, taken, early psychedelic studies happened at Esalen, and now they're out in the world. Different forms of psychology started there, and those are out in the world and scaling. And so I can understand the viewpoint of like, well, we got to get this to everyone. It's got to be accessible. And yet, this is precisely what I was doing with my work is starting with things that didn't scale and just seeing like, could we make it work better than anything that's ever worked before?
So do you want to check in on your patient?
Yeah. So Dylan was one of our first patients for Faria, where we took a inspired by what we've seen working in depression, applying it to people who are healthier, and seeing if we can use compressed protocols. So typically conventional TMS is once a day for multiple weeks. There's been enough evidence now in FDA approval for these compressed protocols where we do them in weeks. And we actually did a protocol that inspired by a study by Jonathan Downer and others, where they combined TMS, so the magnetic stimulation, with a psychoplastogen, in this case D-cycloserine. And it's an interesting way how these things synergize, where they were able to see results in one day of treatments rather than multiple days. So it's incredible, like just the speed. Like we've gone from TMS taking weeks to 5 days to 1 day, and we adapted that protocol for Dylan, and he was one of our first people to go through the experience. So how are you feeling? How are you feeling today?
Before we hear from Dylan, maybe we can, just so we don't lose it, can you describe like what is a plastogen? I think that's the only thing that
in this case it's a weak NMDA receptor agonist, and like D-cycloserine, my understanding is that it's a very old drug. It's off patent. It's actually hard to get. So you have to get it compounded and made on your own. But it was originally like there was hope, like ketamine, that it would be assistive in psychotherapy. It didn't work out a couple of decades ago, and so it's a weak NMDA receptor agonist. You're combining that with the magnetic stimulation, and those two for things I don't think we fully understand why.
For a layman, though, is that
I think a way to think about it. think a way to think about it, and I actually could be challenged on this. I'm thinking from the ground up here is that the NMDA receptor agonism changes the potential threshold, so it takes less to stimulate the neuron, and then when you combine that with the induction of the field, you're basically able to excite neurons easier than you could with it on its own.
All right. Well, let's hear from your patient.
So I'll start with like a little bit of background for people who don't kind of know my history. I just like growing up in a pretty rough childhood in Sri Lanka, civil war, domestic situations and whatnot. I carry a lot of kind of childhood trauma, and this has been, like I was saying earlier, throughout my life, right? This been kind of like this rock that I've carried around. It's like this weight that makes just everything a little harder than it needs to be. And even though I've kind of done well through just like brute forcing, like Jeep was saying earlier, it's just like I've always wondered, like, if I didn't have this rock that I was carrying around, how good life would be. And there's been part of my obsession to just get better, and hopefully better than better, right? And I've tried a lot of things throughout, and Ibogaine last year was one of the biggest life changing experiences for myself as well. And among other things, after Ibogaine, I had this like 8-ish month period where I didn't feel that weight. And I was almost asking myself, like, am I going manic? Like, am I losing my mind? Because I was like just feeling good all the time. It's like, this is not normal, right? Like, you're supposed to feel okay and good all the time. And but it is, and that was incredible, and it was like among the most productive months of my life, both work wise and relationship wise and friendship wise. Just like everything was just flourishing. And fast forward just a few weeks back, the Ibogaine effect tends to wear off to some degree after some time, and other factors as well kind of going. Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's beyond how long the Ibogaine should be active in the system. So,
right. Oh, yeah, for
that
sure.
means there were other positive things were going for you.
Yeah. And a lot of and then recently just like some work stresses and whatnot, and it's like confluence of factors. I was kind of feeling down, and that like kind of rock was back, or like that weight that was kind of holding me back was there. And you can tell it's like something very palpable, right? It's like usually I don't, I like working out, for example, and then like when you're in this mood, just like going to the gym, doing that thing, it's just a little bit harder, and just like don't feel like doing it and whatnot, and that has this activation energy is high, right? And this is like actually like a big difference between like when we think about our more successful some of our successful friends, and even extreme cases like Elon's like kind of like a high functioning case of mania almost, right? Like the guy has like enormous amounts of energy, and like there's like and there's a lot of upside there if you can control that. But and then there's the other side of it is like kind of you're still talented and smart, working hard, but like you're dragging this rock around. And then so I'm so last 3 weeks it's like kind of having a bit of a lull, and I hear from Jeeshan and about this new startup that he's doing. And I had actually looked into TMS way back many years ago, because TMS is classically identified as one of the more effective therapies for childhood trauma, CPTSD and stuff like that. And but then classic version of TMS is like you go to the clinic once a week for like, I don't know, 6 months or whatever, and that's just like a total pain. Yeah, it's very expensive, so I never ended up doing it. And then I had read about like rapid accelerated version of TMS that does work more effectively, and then I hear from Jeeshan that he's doing this new startup, and I'm like, yeah, hell yeah, let's do it, right? Like, it's just like always willing to be a guinea pig.
If you look up early adopter in the dictionary, there's a big photo of Dylan right there.
Yeah,
I think it's like Dylan and Tim Ferriss are just like right there, being like, I will try it.
Yeah. So like my wife is totally freaking out because it's like the nth time you're gonna try to mush your brain, or you're gonna come back the same person kind of thing. Anyway, and so I have this experience. It was just like I just want to take a minute to how professional and incredible the kind of the organization and all the people that I interacted with, Jeeshan, in your team.
Thank you.
So you're building an incredible team and a company. I'm really excited for that. And yeah, so I had this treatment over really 10 hours on Sunday. And the treatment itself is like not the most pleasant, but like it was fine.
Do you describe it? Like what's it feel like to have the paddle?
Yeah. So you have this paddle on your head, like Jeeshan described it. There's this like specific target in the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex that targets depression, and that's a target that they worked on in my case. every 25 minutes, you have a 3-minute treatment where every few seconds there's a magnetic pulse that is activated, and so it's targeting the brain inside the brain, but the brain doesn't have any neurons, nerves, so you don't actually get any sensation from the brain. But what I learned from Jeeshan and others is that you do feel like this kind of sharp, like kind of weird pain. It's as if it's coming from inside the skull. But what's really happening is that the same magnetic pulse is activating kind of some facial muscles and whatnot that is causing that weird pain. And that pain.
Would you describe it like a lot of people describe it like as a woodpecker or tapping? Yeah.
It's kind of like a woodpecker pecking at a very rapid rate, something like that. Yeah, it kind of inside your brain, and like you kind of like your eye field starts kind of sore and all these things. It's a really, really odd feeling. Like nothing I have experienced before. And yeah, so I get 20 doses of this, and
is it even possible to do a double-blind controlled experiment on this?
People have done this. They do them. They do what's like sham treatments, where it's either like it's on the wrong target, or the dose is so low that it's actually like it stimulates the feeling that you get, but it's actually not penetrating into the brain.
Got it. So you can placebo people.
Yeah, you can sham it basically. You do a sham procedure.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, and came home, went to bed, slept well. I'm 3 days in. It's Wednesday, so the treatment I got was last Sunday, and I just feel really terrible today, just like awful. Oh, I'm kidding.
You
see it in my face? I was like,
a little bit more. The smirk in the corner of your mouth.
No, I'm
trying to hold a poker face, but I was like, all right.
Yeah.
I woke up this morning, I went for a walk, got some coffee, a matcha, and I was just like, walking over Alamo Square and like looking at the city. I'm like, fuck, it's just so good to be alive, right? And that rock was not there, and then the weight was
really
not
good
there.
to hear it.
And yeah. And fingers crossed. I hope it lasts, and it's like something is working. Something you did has worked, and I mean, it's like still very early. But yeah, I'm just so grateful that you set this whole thing up. And
thanks. I'm really glad to hear that.
Yeah,
I'm gonna check. I will keep checking in, and I'll ask you like how heavy is it today? I won't just say like how big is the rock today? Is there no rock? Is it a pebble? Is it a stone? Is it a boulder? Like that's like you can come up with a new scale. Yeah. We'll call it the rock scale.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's different from
is that the rock is heavy, right?
It's different from the post Ibogaine feeling. At least in general, post psychedelics, you have like this sort of this euphoria, like kind of type of glow, right? This feels much more neutral than that. And it's just like the only way I can describe it is like absence of depression. Yeah. And it's great, and I'm just like again, like some hard stuff is happening at work, so there are reasons why I could be or should be feeling more bummed out, but I'm not, and that's incredible. So
yeah, and I mean what I'm really excited about is like hear that like that's in days. We'll see. We'll track to see how long it lasts, and that it feels different. Like I'm actually really excited to hear that it feels different from other experiences, because I think that like. We carry these different weights, all of us, and it's all about having a toolkit and having a wide toolkit of what to use at what time. And like this is working now, and there may be a time where it doesn't work, and there may be a time where therapy is better, where coaching's better, where SSRIs would be better. But like it's about having more tools and being able to use them quickly, almost like you're playing jazz with your life, right? It's like we should be able to have that like sense of being able to move quickly through these states.
Well, one question I have is how you think about integration. Like to me, that's like the one hanging thread. You have emphasized again and again in our chat how essential that is, and yet you've got this technology where you're like, well, we took this thing that took weeks or months and we compressed it to a single day, which personally I love. It's very philosophically aligned with my view, which is like we shouldn't have to spend years and years doing this stuff. But how do how do you think about integration with the TMS protocol
Yeah.
you have?
So I think the concept of like psychedelic assisted therapy is very well known, and like there's been a lot of research there. There's an emerging, I would say very early emerging field of like TMS assisted psychotherapy or CBT. It seems like, from the experts that we work with, that CBT works really well at this stage. So I think like I guess what I'm trying to say is like, I don't think we need to invent anything new for this. I think that like we have the tools that will synergize with this really well, and they're not going to be net new tools. They're just going to be things that we already know work, and we need to just include them. And so it's probably the standard set of in this time period to do something like CBT, even meditation, journaling, like sort of like I like to think of these things not as replacements, but coefficients. And if you go back to the GLP-1 example, like I've lost 20 pounds of fat on a GLP-1 in a my body composition has changed in 6 months and would have taken me in 3 years, because my way of earning my GLP-1 is by eating protein and going to the gym lifting 4 times a week. And so I always this is my one point I want people to go away with. These things that we're talking about are not replacements. One, they won't work as well, and I think two, they will be temporarily. So like both the like durability and the effect size will be diminished if they're replacements. But when you use them as coefficients to the other hard things like CBT, like journaling, like meditating, being around people who reinforce the behaviors and models that you like or want to go after, it can be much faster. So we're talking about shortening the time. I'm actually not even talking about taking I don't know if I should say this, but like you put the effort in, it's just your efforts are going to go farther.
Yeah. I mean, one of the best metaphors that I've heard for psychedelics and some of these things that increase neuroplasticity, it's an amplifier, right? Or to use the gym metaphor, it's sort of like, taking steroids and supplements. You still have to get in the gym, right?
Absolutely.
But you're gonna get more results.
Yeah, I mean, don't like the term steroids, but like,
yeah, no,
I do.
That's why I like the amplifier.
Yeah,
but,
it's the amplifier. Yeah, well, like Rosalind Watts is like, the researcher in this space, and she said like psychedelics are like these non-specific amplifiers, right? And so they're highly one context dependent. And so if you're at a concert with lights and sound, like those become more enthralling, and then if you put your attention more inward and reflective, that becomes deepened. And in psychedelic assisted therapy, and like in the most basic sense, like what we are doing is encouraging people to be in a meditative state, in a prayer-like state that on its own is very healing. And then when you amplify it with a psychedelic, it becomes even more so.
Yeah, I don't even know if it's necessarily true that it's not something that you continue to use. It's just like I mean, like the way I envision future human existence is like you just, whatever ailment you have, you just go get a tune-up, right? And like statins. I mean, you and I both, having South Asian heritage, we're kind of cursed with high LDL levels, which is heart disease is the number one killer for pretty much globally, and particularly for South Asians. But statins, among other things, have been like one miracle drug that has been tremendously effective at reducing these risks. And then, speaking of which, actually, there's this company called Verve that was just acquired by, I forgot, it was Eli Lilly or whatever, for $1 billion or so. And what Verve invented is a permanent gene therapy that turns off the PCSK9 protein in your liver, which is critical for LDL production, and essentially like a one-shot treatment that changes your physiology for the rest of your life, that you will have low LDL. And we know this is true, this works, because we have observed humans who, through genetic mutations, do not have the PCSK9 protein, and these people don't get heart disease, right? So now there's finally a tool that can kind of permanently fix you, and just like a one shot, and you're done, right? I'm actually curious about your reactions to that, and but also, the same thing goes for mental health. And another example, speaking of steroids, actually, I'm a huge fan of hormone replacement therapy, which I'm going to be for the rest of my life. But like, once you get it dialed in, like there are like enormous benefits. And there's really no reason to like. One analogy here is that human body, in my mind, is like this sort of like a like a like a like a race car that is optimized by nature as much as possible, to go at max speed until you're like age 25 or 30, and then the driver disappears, and it's like a slow train wreck that happens since from that point onwards. So the nature doesn't give a shit if you're dead or alive, right? And so now what we're coming up with are like these kind of interventions to all the shit that goes wrong. And yeah, so
Yeah, I
so
mean, the
I'm
age is
curious,
interesting, right? Because like it's like why this age, like 25 or 30, and like why is like lifespan kind of around there? It's like the age to get to adolescence and puberty, and then the age to get someone else to adolescence and
right.
puberty, and then it's like,
Yeah.
okay, we don't need you anymore.
Yeah.
Well,
Uh,
to me, it's two things on that one, and then we should start to wrap up soon. One is just, I think the metaphor, I like your metaphor, Dylan. I think it's more like the mechanic and pit crew just leave.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Well, they're just gone. Right?
Yeah.
But I think the question that I have is like this, things like Verve Therapeutics, right? The one shot, and then it gene editing fixes stuff that makes sense for so much in the body. And I'm curious whether you think that's true for the mind, right? Because in the mind, you're looking at how are the neurons actually connected, how are they firing, right? And so there's something, Dylan, that's happening in you where for a while it seems to be firing a certain way where you don't feel like there's a weight, right? And then there's some sort of drift that occurs. So is there ever going to just be a shot or something like that corrects that, or is that not the right metaphor? That's my question. It seems like it's not the possible to just correct for depression with a shot or a one hit wonder sort of thing.
I mean, I think I personally, I'm really curious what Jeeshan thinks, but
Yeah.
I think in some cases it's possible. Again, testosterone helps a lot of people with mental health issues as well, right? Like, and I personally feel much better on TRT, and it is like, it might not be a one hit thing in the sense that you have to take it every week, but it's just like it is possible to continue to maintain a state.
I mean, the one shot things, I'm like the new one shot things. I don't know, like it reminds me of like this company that's engineered bacteria in the brain not to develop caries and cavities, and like you could that like their claim is you'll never have cavities. Yeah, you have it. I'm like, oh, you got it. I just also think like everything in nature is like somewhat like functional, and like what are you eliminating? So like in this thing where you're knocking out this gene, I don't know, I personally like, I kind of like the fact that like what we're doing with TMS, what we can do with psychedelics are not permanent changes. Like they are like inductions, and like in some cases like I'm like, I wish I would make anxiety gone forever, but like I know it's also been functional in my life. Like it drove a lot of my ambition, and so like the tuning I prefer more to than to permanent changes. Just from like I guess that's to my risk profile. So like the idea, like to depend to what you're saying, is like, can you permanently fix things? Like I think everything is somewhat adaptive, and so I like this idea that we were talking about, where it's like we just have a larger set of tools from and tools that just didn't exist like a decade ago or however long, like GLP-1s, TMS, like these like novel psychedelics, like what you're talking about with this gene editing. Like, would you like? There's so much agency for those of us who live in a peaceful place, or like are privileged to have access to these, and then we need to get it to more people to like choose who you want to be. Like there's just so much agency now. Like we talk about it in AI, like, oh, you don't have to be a designer, you don't have to be a coder, but like also for just who you are and who you want to be. And like and when I was younger, I felt like really stuck in my circumstance. I felt really stuck with like what I had available. And I'm like very excited to like bring my son forward in a world where he can choose, and hopefully he can help other people have more access to this too, of like who do you want to be? What's the path there? And like, it's not going to be one single set of tools or sequence of tools for that fits for everybody. I I know it's frustrating when people try things and they don't work. And there's a lot of people betting on biomarkers and like all these sorts of things to help predict that. I hope we get there, right? I think there's probably some signal there to say, you should probably do TMS or you should do CBT. I'm somewhat skeptical of that happening, but I think like, who knows, like we're generating so much data. We have these powerful like algorithms now. Maybe we'll be able to say for someone at one period of life, okay, like this is the thing you need. And it has the highest probability. Failing that, it's why are startups successful? It's because they fail quickly and they're able to try something new. And like we need to be able to bring that same mentality into our own lives. So you try TMS, I'm grateful it's working for you. And when it stops working, it's like, how long did it work? Do we do it again or do we try something else? And like the cost, both in terms of money as well as in terms of effort and time to be able to iterate, is what we need to rapidly iterate on and get faster on.
Yeah, I think that's so well said, G. And what I think you're speaking to is really growth mindset, right? It's like, can you iterate and improve over time and figure out what works for you? I mean, that's my own approach to coaching is, there's this whole toolkit and we're going to just start trying stuff and iterating as fast as possible until we figure out, oh, here are the 3 or the 4
and have some fun with it too, right?
Yeah.
Like I come to the jazz part where it's like this fluid thing and you're following it, or like come to it like how you come to like surfing or something, like these other like very fun, beautiful things where it's like you try something and then teach something else, and like there's a disappointment when a treatment doesn't work out, or you try something and it's like, oh, that didn't work for me, or it's no longer working for me. You're like, yeah, I mean, I guess it's like, what's the other thing? And like, how is it going to get you to feel in a different way that you haven't felt before? And I know that's hard. It's easier said than done. I've struggled with that. Like psychedelics taught me that my anxiety was driven by this need for achievement. So then I started a company in psychedelics, which is very tied to my achievement. It didn't work. It tanked me back into my anxiety. And it's like, okay, now I'm trying different things to help myself. And it's just, I'm saying it out loud to encourage it in myself. It's like, be open to trying things, that things will change. It's hard to say, like, these are the things these weights I'm going to carry. I don't see them as a disability. They're probably strengths in other ways, but like, it's learning to constantly like adapt with them and live with them.
I can't emphasize the agency part more. Like, it's just like we're so lucky to be born in a time where if you have agency, there's so many tools, so many options to feel better, look better, be in better relationships and so on. And it's not even an access problem. Like all the total sum cost of everything that I'm doing, like GLP, I'm microdosing GLP-1s, testosterone replacement therapy, TMS, like, the weird toothpaste you're talking about that will prevent me from ever getting any cavities. The total cost of all this stuff is like less than a quarter of like maybe like a beat up car. Like it's not that expensive. What's lacking is 2 things. One, knowledge, but even more than that, it's sort of this willingness to try. It's kind of, the mentality of approaching life like not some like static fucking thing you're bestowed upon and you can't do anything about it, but it's more like this dynamic puzzle that you get to solve for the rest of your life for your own benefit, and so that you can feel amazing. And yeah, I wish we could just like spread that mindset. Like that would be incredible.
I think it's mindset. I think it's cost. I think for a lot of people it's still too much, and like that's what we're obsessed with, is like, how do we get the cost down? And we're also obsessed with like the idea of like, generating this data for coverage. Insurance coverage is extremely challenging, going through the FDA, then trying to even get the economic studies. And so, one path we're taking is that, going outside of insurance, which means like, our service right now is cash pay. That's a barrier for a lot of people, but we think that like my past company was trying to do stuff through a regulated like double-blind clinical trials. That's very slow, very expensive. The other path is to show, well, in a natural experiment, like following people like yourselves and saying like, well, able to be much more creative. We're able to try different protocols, and over time show that this is actually something that should be covered at this much lower price point that we're offering. Because when you're in that, you go through this world of like, well, if I'm going through all these hoops to get this approved in the regulated way, I have to charge this incredible amount to make up for that level of investment. And so companies are dictated to charge these, like what seems like these exorbitant prices. Like, why is TMS, like conventional TMS, like billed to the insurer, like often like $20,000 or $30,000, depending on the payer,
it's crazy,
right?
yeah.
It's crazy, but it was like, that's what it costs to get it there. And now we have this world where like, you're just playing arbitrage on these things versus like, if we could do it at a tenth of the price, get much more people to use it in the field. And so actually like insurance company, like put this in, like starting with self-insured employers and diverting from there. Like, we need both approaches. And being on this one side, I'm really excited to be on the other, to be like, well, who's going to get there faster? Let's have it be a race.
Well, this was so great. And I feel like we need to have you back just to
absolutely.
you just started a whole new topic there that I'm ready to go for 2 more hours on. So I just
thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, G, I want to thank you so much. It's such a fascinating hour for me, and yet I feel like we barely even scratched the surface on, learning about you and your story, and then also, the impact of all of this work that you're doing in TMS, and learning more about the current state of psychedelics. So thank you.
Maybe we'll have you back for my 3-month check-in.
I think we should. I was just thinking that. Let's see how the rock feels in like a month, maybe 2 months.
Let's do it. So good. And thank you everyone for tuning in, which is such a wonderful conversation with Dr. Jeeshan Chowdhury, and hopefully you all found it to be fun and enjoyable. And hit that like button and the subscribe button, and tell us what we can do better and what kind of guests we should bring on and so on. It's been an incredible episode of Almost Got It, and see you next time.